Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Guys Who Stare at Stats. Cade Kennedy with you alongside Tyler Riggs as we have made it to Conference Championship weekend, and the college football playoff rankings came out yesterday. We had some other stuff going on, so couldn't get to it immediately yesterday, but still here to react to it as we always will. We'll be back, of course, Sunday for that reaction as well. But as always, before we truly get into things here, feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below. It only takes a moment or two out of your day, but we do sincerely appreciate it. Over 100 subscribers, nearly to 110 now. Let's see if we can get to 110 or 115 by the end of the year. Just, hey, 2 to 7 more people. It's not a big number. I think we can hit it, Tyler. But either way, I mean, you look at this ranking and not a whole lot sticks out to me. When we look at least the top four, everything went as expected. Georgia at number 5 does not surprise me. Ohio State at 6 shocks me a little bit just in terms of how they compare to Miami. Miami loses to a 9-3 Syracuse team. You could make the argument Syracuse might be a better loss than Michigan would be. Miami drops 6 spots for it. Ohio State only dropping 4 by scoring 10 points against Michigan. That one's a little bit head-scratching for some people, but Tennessee at 7, SMU 8, Indiana 9, Boise at number 10. I think for the most part, everyone's okay with that. The big conundrum, though, and you know this as well as I, if you've seen any social media, I've seen a lot of people outraged about it, Alabama is back at number 11, which means, barring something astronomically crazy, Alabama will be in the college football playoff.
Yeah, and the way they talked about it committee-wise post-elections Tuesday night, it essentially, the way they described it in terms of their thought process is if you're not going to play in the conference championship week, you're not going to get moved, right? So they're not going to do a big reconsideration after conference championship week. You might have some reaction to those games in terms of the conference championship games, a la should have Boise State lose to UNLV or something like that. But it sounds like if you're, sitting idle, you're pretty much where you are, barring craziness in those conference championship games, which, man, if you're South Carolina, if you're Ole Miss, I could see being very upset at the committee right now, especially a team like South Carolina, who, yes, they lost to Bama by 2, lost to LSU by 3, lost to Ole Miss. They lost to those two teams in front of them. But the way they finished the season, you smack A&M, you beat Missouri, you beat Clemson on the road to end the season. I would say they had a pretty strong case. Miami's kind of the odd question, and people are going to rightfully point at Bama and say, hey, yes, Miami lost 2 games, right? They were to Georgia Tech on the road and Syracuse on the road. Syracuse, ranked team, good team, 9-3 overall, like I said, probably could argue a good loss. You're up 21-0 that game. Bama, other than the Tennessee loss, losing to Oklahoma just a couple weeks ago in Norman, the way they did was embarrassing.
Yeah, getting blasted in Norman and then losing to Vanderbilt as well. Just not good losses to have at all.
So I could see the gripe for anybody saying, why on God's green earth is Alabama ahead of Miami, Ole Miss, or South Carolina for that matter?
Yeah, I mean, and you add into it, the Alabama, the win over Auburn. And this is something, and I'm going to sound very, I don't know, I'm going to sound like a hater when I say this, I guess is really the best way to put it. This is a game that Alabama turns the ball over in 4 times. And not to play the could have, would have, should have game, but if Hugh Freeze has a competent brain, that is a 1-possession game, maybe a tie game in the 4th quarter. If you make some simple plays here and there, you don't try to go for it in random situations and take your points, kind of force it, and you get into, a play away from a play away from a play away. And I don't want to delve into that too much because then you get into, real tinfoil hat theory territory. But it's a game that Alabama did not play well in and still found a way to win 28-14. That's a game that, given the circumstances, and, if you were going to tell me Jalen Milroe was going to look good, he was going to look more like himself, but Alabama was going to have 4 turnovers, I would have said they would have lost that game. I would have said they probably are going to get beat, 28-21 or 28-24, something along those lines. So it's a credit to Alabama for winning that game, but I don't understand, A, why Miami gets put in the middle of Ole Miss and South Carolina. And understand that break, first of all. I feel like they should be above all three SEC teams or below all three. And
Right.
then
Yep.
South Carolina, I want I think they're the best of those three right now. If you look at that group of three SEC teams, I think they are the hottest hand right now. I think their whole line of thinking is, hey, if we played them again, we would beat them. And I think, given the circumstances, they probably could. But
Probably could.
unfortunately, they lost to them when they did. Now, is that a bit unfair that, that was back in, early October? It is a little bit. But at the same time, that's, we kind of joked about it when the 12-team playoff was announced. We're really going to have to sit here and debate which 9-3 team gets in. And here we are sitting and debating which 9-3 team deserves to be in.
Quite frankly, the answer is probably none of them, because I would have still put Miami in. Because, yeah, that loss to Syracuse when you're up, you're leading, looks bad, but it's a much better loss compared to what those teams below have, I think, overall.
Yeah, and that's where I feel like I said, I feel like Miami should either be above all three SEC teams because Miami's two losses are not that bad, but the argument it comes to, and it's always interesting to see how this comes to, because if you remember when this thing started as a 4-team playoff, we had the fun joke of quality losses. Well, who's the best loss out there? That argument is completely flipped, and it's now who's the best win you have. And Miami doesn't have a whole lot of great wins when you look at it. That's just the nature of the ACC. I don't want to say having a down year when you look at SMU and you look at Clemson in there and now Syracuse ranked. But for all intents and purposes, the ACC is not having that great of a year. And that's when it comes to hurt Miami. It's the same argument I had about Indiana a few weeks ago. They can't control the conference being down. They can only play the games in front of them.
Right. Well, and I think it's, when Georgia's win over Georgia Tech is hailed as gritty as, hey, look, Georgia's able to do it. Well, Miami's loss was to Georgia Tech on the road, and people were clowning them for it. And that Georgia Tech team overall was pretty good,
Yeah,
and that
they
was
are.
in the middle of the road ACC team. So I think the ACC is getting kind of unfairly shafted overall in terms of just how the conference is this year. I think top to bottom, there's tougher teams in it than, let's say, the Big 12. I don't want to offend Big 12 fans by that. I'm not saying the conference is bad, but I think if you look at, just tough road teams that can sneak up on you, I think the ACC's got a little bit better build than that compared to the Big 12 this year. So I think they're getting some unfair overshadowing going on there. I feel bad for South Carolina and all this. And like you said, he pointed out, when two of three of your losses are to teams ahead of you, that Ole Miss, Alabama, and you think you're the better team now. Unfortunately, that's where the head-to-head comes into play, because they're all three losses, and South Carolina was the odd man out in that, despite them probably honestly looking like the best team of the three down the stretch of the season.
Yeah, and I mean the chaos this has created, not even in terms of the rankings themselves, but if you've been on social media, you've seen head coaches making their cases. You've seen athletic directors beefing with each other on Twitter. I never
commissioners making their cases.
Yeah, the ACC itself putting out that big graphic saying SMU in, Miami should be in, Clemson potentially should be in. There could be 3 ACC teams in the play. It's been nuts to see. And I mean, it's kind of half the fun of this thing. But then the other half is realizing that, oh my goodness, some of these teams are going to get left out. That, you hate saying, wow, they had a great season. Too bad you aren't one of the best 12 teams in the country. But we all knew that argument was coming down the line. And I feel bad for South Carolina because I do legitimately believe they're probably playing better football than some of the other teams that are going to be above them. But at the end of the day, it's a complete body of work, and it unfortunately has a loss to Alabama, and it has a loss to Ole Miss in it. Now, I think Ole Miss, you can make that kind of similar case in that, hey, if we're going by wins, they have probably one of the better wins of anybody, just dismantling Georgia, and that counters Bama's win over Georgia.
Yeah, you would think so, and that's where this gets really tough. But I hate to say it for any, South Carolina, Bama fan, Miami fan. If you're arguing if you're the last team in, you're probably not good enough to win this whole thing.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I feel sometimes. But I mean, we can pull up the Alabama schedule here just to kind of look at it. You look at, they have the Georgia win, obviously. They have the South Carolina win, obviously. The thing that gets them credit at the end of the day is blowing out Missouri the way they did. And you can say, well, Missouri had a backup quarterback. But at the end of the day, they still won 34-0. They beat LSU up on the road. That's an 8-4 LSU team. They're going to get credit for that. And then the Oklahoma loss, of course, is really bad. Same with Vanderbilt. And then you look at Auburn, that's a game you didn't lose. You just needed to not lose that, essentially, compared to a team like Ole Miss, where, yes, you also beat South Carolina. Yes, you manhandled Georgia. They beat Oklahoma, though. That's a big point they have. Yes, they lost to Florida, who I would argue is a better loss than either Vanderbilt or Oklahoma. The Kentucky loss Kentucky kind of balances that out, though. 5-7 versus 7-5. If you want to put them together, they're both 6-6. I don't know how you really want to balance that out. That's a committee question that I wish I could ask them. The thing that gets me at the end of the day, though, if you want to balance those out, it's Ole Miss lost to LSU and Alabama beat them. I think that's kind of where it comes down to at the end of the day. And that was a back and forth game with Ole Miss and LSU, but you look at the difference between what they did and what Bama did as that third loss to have. Tennessee's a lot better looking of a loss than LSU. And I think that's where Bama gets the nod. As much as I'd like to say Ole Miss should be above Bama, in the way the committee thinks, that's not going to help them at all.
No, it's not. And, that's unfortunate.
And I mean, you just look at
with those three teams, and again, outside of okay, no, I'll say that's unfortunate because I really do feel like Alabama's not a good enough team to kind of be in at this point. But it is, a little bit of the brand name. It's a little bit of, well, Alabama's still got enough good wins that you could kind of justify it. It feels wrong because, like I said, I don't think they're a good enough team to go do anything in the playoffs.
Yeah,
they're probably gonna get beat.
Yeah, it's just one of those. It's a matchup type of deal, and we'll get to the bracket in a moment, what it would look like as of today. But I want to get to one final thing, and that's the Big 12 here, because Big 12 fans, they've got a right to be mad that your conference champion is probably going to finish 15th in the poll. You're still going to get in. They're going to get a conference champion, but they've been mad about, you had Brett Yormark coming out and saying a 10-2 team should not get put below basically the Mountain West champ. He called them out, said a group of 5 should not be above a Power 4 champ in any way whatsoever. And for Arizona State, the big argument is, hey, we have 2 losses. One of those was with our starting quarterback out. We had Sims for that game. Lost to Cincinnati. It's not a good loss. It's a little bit more explainable when you realize it's the backup quarterback game that they had to play. But at the end of the day, it's just one of those, I get where they're coming from. It's the same thing with South Carolina. I understand the frustration, but if you're Arizona State or Iowa State, you at least have the opportunity to just win that game in front of you, and you still get in and get a chance to prove yourself.
Yeah, that's why, I didn't really mention Arizona State. I'm not worried about them. I feel like they're going to go take care of business, and it'll all be okay in the end, and they'll get a chance to prove themselves in the playoffs, right? And kind of have a way to earn some respect for the Big 12 in that sense. South Carolina's the one just because they don't have that opportunity, But with the situation at hand, they just hate to say they did it to themselves, but that's where those early season losses matter, right? And it doesn't seem like it's been fairly applied at times across some of these rankings, but that's the way it kind of shook out. So it seems like the committee to agree split hairs in certain aspects. Some other aspects are like, well, Georgia, for example, 10-2, Tennessee 10-2. We just squeeze them in where they are. Miami is another one where, as we've talked about, I think they got unfairly squeezed out just because I think their resume, although they may not have the huge win, those losses aren't bad. And they're just not bad losses compared to Alabama.
Yeah,
so,
but at the end of the day, it's the committee valuing the wins. I saw the formula with it because there's 2 guys that are really good about nailing the formula down every single year. It hasn't changed since 2014 when we started this thing, where it's, what's your quality wins, what's your top 25 wins, what's your game control metric, which we've talked about that a bit here and there, where it's, how dominant do you look in your games, things like that. When you go out and you're a Ole Miss or an Alabama, and when you have some of those games where you can just blow somebody out, that does help a lot. I think that was the problem for Miami at the end of the day. They had too many comebacks that, yes, were big for Miami, and that's what's kept them here. But getting into that situation in the first place is what ultimately doomed them.
Yeah, it is. And, we've talked about it before where it's humans, it's the eye test. So a lot of that stuff, they'll say, oh, it doesn't matter. We're evaluating off this metrics. At the end of the day, when it comes down to where the metrics essentially tell you the teams are equal, you've got to go off the eye test. So how, those style points like you're talking about, who'd you beat when, how well did you beat them, that sort of thing. It all plays into it at the end of the day when you get this tight of a race for a singular spot.
Absolutely. And then you look at the playoff bracket, what it would look like right now. It would look like a lot of fun. That's what it looks like right now. Your first round, you'd have Arizona State, Penn State, Tennessee going up to Ohio State, Alabama, Notre Dame. That's the one everyone kind of looked forward to is, okay, if we're going to put Alabama in this thing, who are they going to get? Notre Dame might be the one team they could struggle with the most, I would say. So that's kind of where you get that draw there. And then Indiana and Georgia. My goodness, you want to talk about the statement of all statement games. If Jekyll and Hyde Georgia shows up again and Indiana plays, okay, that could turn into one of the maybe funniest days on social media you could ever see, or maybe one of the nightmare days, depending on how you feel about Indiana and Georgia. And then Oregon, Texas, SMU, and Boise State all getting the buys as of right now.
Yeah, and I think that's the neat thing of this, that people are going to complain, they're going to mope about, that final spot, final two spots. But once this thing starts, there's going to be storyline after storyline and so many intriguing matchups that people are going to go, we can live with a little bit of the drama and the controversy and realizing that, okay, Team 12 may not be the 12th best team, but at the end of the day, it's a good format.
Yeah, it's one of those people will be mad about Alabama until Alabama gets beat. Then everyone will get to say, I told you so, and we'll move on with life. Unless, of course, Alabama somehow makes it to the national championship, and then everyone would just be mad.
Oh, that might be the worst thing. That might be the worst thing to happen.
You say that, but, every once in a while, you get a weird thing that happens or two, and a college game can completely flip on its head. But, folks, as always, thank you for watching. Said it at the beginning of the video, said it here again. Feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to always be notified when new videos come out. And feel free to leave a comment down below. What do you agree with this on? What do you disagree with us on? Whether it be us, the committee, anything else, really. You talk about whatever. I really do not care. It means no difference to me at the end of the day. But thank you, of course, again, for those who have subscribed, for those watching till the end of the video. We truly do thank you for that. It does mean a lot to us. Some people, it may not as much with bigger subscriber counts, things like that, but to us, it does mean a lot. So, folks, as always, until next time, have a good one, everybody.